Now the moment you have all been waiting for, which is, can I please ask Adrian Johnston to come and give your 19J valedictorian speech?
I'd like to start by welcoming you all to my official valedictorian day. You really didn't need to dress up with all the hats and the gowns, by the way, but it's very nice of you. Just so you're prepared, the last two words of my speech will be an INSEAD expression, which I'm told by my Lebanese friends was actually invented here at INSEAD by the Lebanese over 400 years ago, which is the phrase, Yalla Habibis. I'd like to say an enormous thank you to the friends and family for being here. We know that we wouldn't be here without you. If you haven't been to one of these graduations before, then I should probably just warn you that watching 500 of us go up and collect certificates for 2 hours will probably be quite boring. But don't worry, you'll be pleased to know that I've had a word with the administration, and they've actually agreed that during that part of the ceremony, they're going to show Game of Thrones on the screens. And if you get bored of watching the power-hungry monsters who want to take over the world, then you can just watch Game of Thrones. People have traveled from all over to be here, and for some people, traveling can be difficult. This is especially true if your name happens to be Jihad. Where is Jihad? Give me a wave. Jihad said in his video that he thought it would be awesome and hilarious to have 2,000 people shouting Jihad on graduation. So I think we should give it a go. What do you guys think? Okay, I want this loud enough so they can hear us in the chateau. All together after 3. 1, 2, 3, Jihad! Only at INSEAD. Don't worry, I'm pretty sure they're going to cut that bit out of the YouTube video. Everybody here has brought something unique to the class of 19J. To name just a few people that stand out in particular for me, Omar and Lucas with their incredible new welcome weekend. Rawan and Mayar with their unforgettable Lebanon trek. Marcel. Marcel is the brain behind the brain drive, and I'm pretty sure that I would not be graduating without him. But there are also people who don't necessarily like to be centre stage, but who quietly make this place, the INSEAD, the incredible place that it is. Everyone here has their own story, and all of our stories together make the INSEAD story. I wanted to speak to you today about rules. Having spent 4 months in Singapore, I now consider myself somewhat of an expert in rules. It seems to me that there are some rules which are worth keeping, but there are definitely some rules which are worth breaking. Let me give you an example. One weekend in Singapore, I went for a walk in the forest, and I came across an enormous reservoir of crystal clear water. Surrounding the reservoir, there were hundreds of signs everywhere saying, "Do not swim, cannot, cannot." But you have to understand there were lots of these types of signs in Singapore, and it was a really hot day, so I just thought, as we say in Britain, bollocks to it. So I took off my clothes and I went for a skinny dip. Later that day, I was telling this story to my Singaporean groupmate, and as I was speaking, his eyes started to widen. "You know that there are thousands of crocodiles in that reservoir," he said. "They could have bitten off your crown jewels." Okay, he didn't describe them as crown jewels, but that's what he meant. Needless to say, this is an example of a rule which is definitely worth keeping. But there are also rules which are worth breaking. From what I hear of the residents of Club 16 in P1, they can tell you a lot about these rules. But let me give you another example of a rule worth breaking. When I was in Singapore, I had the privilege of being invited to dinner at the home of Lee Huan Woo, who is the grandson of Lee Kuan Yew, who was the founder of Singapore and the guy who opened the INSEAD Singapore campus. Well, it turns out that Huan Wu is actually gay, and he has a husband who he lives with. In Singapore, it is still illegal to be gay, and there is strong anti-gay sentiment. But this doesn't stop Huan Wu. He is very public about his relationship, despite the negative effect that this has on his career. As a gay man myself, I was hugely inspired by meeting Huan Wu. It takes incredible bravery to stand up to a rule like this. Another rule which can be damaging, a social rule which can be damaging, is the taboo surrounding speaking about mental health. The very first thing that we did on the first day of INSEAD was the small group PLDP session. We were going around the group, and I remember thinking that I would just say something bland and it would all be over. But as we went around the group, something amazing started to happen. One by one, my group mates started to share their stories, their real stories. Eventually, it got to me, and I remember asking myself, shall I open up or not? Shall I be honest or not? 6 months before INSEAD, I had gone through what I can only describe as a near mental breakdown. It was mostly caused by stress at work, but I really couldn't understand why it happened, because my work has always been pretty stressful, and I've always been completely fine. When things got bad, I would just have a cup of Earl Grey tea, look at a picture of the Queen, and everything would be okay. But for some reason, one day, something just tripped in my brain, and I was no longer fine. I became overwhelmed with debilitating, crippling anxiety. I couldn't sleep, and I could only just about continue going to work. I started therapy, and when I started at INSEAD 6 months later, I was no longer feeling anxious, but the whole thing was just so unexpected that it had shattered my confidence. I sat in that small group PLDP session on the first day, and I started to share my experiences with my group mates, even though I'd barely told my family about it in the UK. I'm sure that I'm not the only person who feels like they might have overshared in that first PLDP session, but I'm also sure that I'm not the only person who received overwhelming support from my group mates. Part of me was a little bit afraid of telling this story here because I didn't want people to think that I was weak or for it to have an impact on my future career. But then I thought, well, if anything was going to ruin my future career, then my vegetable story at Storytelling Club has probably already done that. There is an amazing strength in being able to share openly and work through difficulties together. And I hope that we can continue to do this after INSEAD. For me, INSEAD picked me up at a time when I was down. It dusted me down and set me back on the path. This has been one of the most incredible years of my life. And so before I go on to the last part of my speech, I just wanted to say this. Thank you. The world that we live in today is built on rules. We have shaped these rules over centuries to allow us to create the amazing world we see around us with incredible institutions like INSEAD, the best business school in the world, in 2017. But there are also some very obvious challenges which we face, which are also the direct result of the rules of the system that we have built. There are many different challenges which I could mention here. Huge and growing wealth inequality, the weakening of democratic structures, unemployment due to technology and automation. But as far as I can see, there is one challenge which strikes me as far bigger than any of these, and this is the threat of climate change and ecological destruction. So why do I single this issue out as being the biggest challenge for our generation? The reason is because of the urgency of the situation and the potentially devastating consequences of inaction. The Earth is a spaceship traveling through space, and we are the astronauts. How do astronauts treat their spaceship? With massive respect, because they know that it's their only means of survival. Well, our spaceship is catching fire. A few days ago, the temperature in France reached 46 degrees, which is 2 degrees higher than the previous maximum that has ever been recorded here. According to the UN's panel on climate change, we are less than 12 years away from the point at which runaway climate change becomes irreversible with unimaginable consequences. In that time, unprecedented changes to all aspects of our society need to have taken place, including a reduction in carbon emissions by at least 45%. The figures from the UN are calculated and peer-reviewed by 2,500 climate scientists from 130 countries around the world. We must see the seriousness and historic nature of this challenge. This is the challenge that has been given to our generation. Our parents and grandparents faced huge challenges too, like world wars and nuclear proliferation. But they stepped up to address these challenges. We have not inherited this planet from our grandparents. Rather, we borrow the planet from our children. We pay it forward. There are 8 billion astronauts on this spaceship. Putting the fire out will require disruption of traditional business models on a scale that has never been seen before. And that's where we come in, as future business leaders. And let's be honest about it. Given the speed and magnitude of the change required, this will probably also require deep and far-reaching government intervention. If this is important to us, then it's up to us to elect leaders who will make this issue a priority. You might be feeling depressed by all of this, but I'm not. I'm feeling energized. We came to INSEAD to learn how to work on difficult problems. Well, this is the hardest problem that humanity has ever faced. This is the best and most exciting case study that we will ever have to work on. There is still time to fix our spaceship, but it will require some rule breakers. Lee Huan-Yu in Singapore is a rule breaker. Having spent the last year with all of you guys at INSEAD, I am filled with hope because I know that you guys are a bunch of rule breakers too. I saw this when I saw Gergana breaking the rules of the fast fashion industry to create the sustainable fashion brand Blondes Gone Rogue. I saw this with Teddy Tran breaking the rules of agricultural production in Vietnam to distribute sustainable fertilizers. I saw this with Ihorere and Yannick, who worked tirelessly in Singapore on the Singing for All campaign with the administration to break an unjust rule in Singapore. We saw this in every single lecture with the Italians breaking the Swiss train rule. They say that you need to know the rules of the system before you can break them. Well, 19J, we have just spent the last year learning the rules of the system. Now let's go out and break them. Yalla Habibis!